What's going on, guys? Hope everyone's having a wonderful day here. We're going to jump into another Warhammer 40k video here. We got one from my boy Luton. This one is called Dark Beginnings, Necrons, Old Ones, and Eldar. Warhammer 40,000 lore history. So I'm assuming this is going to talk about exactly that. Kind of the beginning of the Old Ones and the Necrons and the Eldar. I know, you know, the Necrons are really kind of like the first mortal race, I guess you could say. They were called the Necron tier. They lived on a planet that was full of radiation, so they were constantly sick. They found the Old Ones, or the Old Ones found them, and they begged the Old Ones, you know, to help them, to help cure them. The Old Ones refused. They got pissed off. A war started, the Great War. Honestly, the war in heaven, the greatest war the galaxy has seen before or since, you know, in the 40k timeline. Then the Catan got involved. Which were like, you know, these star beings. They were like gods that could eat stars. That kind of tricked the Necrons into giving up their souls. The Catan consumed their souls, and the Necrons were converted into these, you know, metallic beings. And then, you know, to combat them, and what that happened, the Old Ones created the Eldar and the Orcs, and everything kind of goes from there. That's pretty much what I know about that as far as, you know, the war in heaven goes. So I'm interested to see if we get into any more of that, the creation of the Old Ones, where the Old Ones maybe really came from, if that's even known, because that is something I would like to know more about, is the Old Ones themselves, you know, how powerful they really are, where they really came from, etc, etc. So yeah, let's get into this. Again, Dark Beginnings, Necrons, Old Ones, and Eldar, Warhammer 40,000 lore. As always, links down below in the description to the original video here and to Luton's channel. So you can go over there, and if you would do me a favor and give this video of his a like if you enjoy it when we watch this. He also does a lot of great 400k content, so go over there, check out his channel. If he's got content you guys like, please do give him a sub. Guy deserves a lot of support. We're doing this video live here, as you can see, from our YouTube members, so if you would like to come and join in the discussion, love to see you guys here and hang out and talk with you guys as we go through and do these videos. We do them every Monday. There's a join button down below the video. Feel free to click the join button and see if any of the YouTube membership benefit tiers have any kind of interest to you guys. But yeah, like I said, we'd love to have you guys in here and to join in our discussions. But for now, let's jump into this video. Let's get it. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
This is Luton.
Yes.
Welcome to my new series exploring the universe of Warhammer 40,000.
Okay.
40k is a vast and fascinating universe with lore so complicated you could spend literally weeks discussing it.
More than that.
So one of the most difficult choices for me was where to begin with it. Now, the universe of 40k is such a mass of cross-referenced nuances and interlinked stories of revenge, justice, hatred, and brutality. It's like trying to explain the whole of human history to an alien race. So breaking the lore of 40k down into YouTube videos is quite a complicated matter. Now, one last thing to mention is that Games Workshop themselves have stated that in the 41st millennium, information is fragmented, intercepted, distorted, suppressed, and often flat out just false.
That way they can retcon things, change things, make new additions, etc., etc. It gives them, you know, an opening to do whatever they want to with the universe whenever they want to, which is pretty clever. It's pretty clever, and, you know.
So with this in mind, a lot of 40k lore, beyond stuff that you would consider out-and-out facts, can be regarded more as hearsay than something that's just set in stone. This is especially true of ancient lore and race histories. This is in part because it allows Games Workshop to make changes to the universe without upsetting devout players, but it also makes a lot of sense in reality where war has been raging since almost the beginning of time. Also, if you look at humanity, it's often true that history is written by the victors. And so with that in mind, you might expect some facts within the universe of 40k to be anything from an eyewitness account to complete misinformation.
Right, exactly.
Which then, you know, translates to becoming the gospel.
I do find that funny that the Imperium has lost track of actual time and they don't know what year it really is. I find that funny. So, I mean, and again, there have been warp incursions and things like that. So who knows, warp, that stuff could have messed with the universal time constant and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so who knows what the year really is.
Gospel word as it's passed down through the ages. So where do we start our journey into the grim darkness of the 41st millennium? At the beginning, of course. We leave the Imperium of Mankind behind and travel some 60 million years before to the earliest time where one peaceful, hyper-advanced race were masters of their own destinies. These beings are simply referred to as the Old Ones, and they are, as far as recorded, the first sentient life in the universe. Their lives focused on the acquisition of knowledge and to seed the universe with life, terraforming and creating new species, including one unintelligent ape-like species on a small blue planet in the Milky Way. Now, very little specific details exist around the Old Ones themselves, but the story of their place in the grand scheme of things is where we will begin. Now, the Old Ones had great psychic powers and built many wonders of godlike beauty and size, and it was this vast understanding of the universe that allowed them to manipulate alternate dimensions and begin constructing their arguably greatest achievement, known as the Webway. Now, as its name describes, this is a web of pathways that allowed the Old Ones to travel through a vast sea of dimensional energy known as the Warp. The Warp was a dangerous and disruptive expanse of powerful psychic energy parallel to real space, although in the early times it was a lot more passive than it is in the 41st millennium, where it's extremely full of dark, horrific, chaotic energy.
Yeah, I mean, back then, the universe, well, at least our galaxy, was far more peaceful, There weren't... The Chaos Gods are fed by, emotion and various types of emotion, whether it be from war and all that kind of stuff, or, pleasure and depravity and hope, despair, etc., etc. So, things were far less turbulent back then because the Chaos Gods may not have even existed back then, potentially, or they just didn't have enough, necessarily power. Things weren't as turbulent. It is always one of the questions that I really had and would like to learn more about that, time period is, were the Chaos Gods around then? What kind of power did they have? And did the Old Ones know about the Chaos Gods, and did they fight against them? You know what I mean? It would seem to be a kind of an indication that they knew about the potential, at least in chaos, and the potential of the gods to be formed if they weren't already. So they created the Webway to not disturb that, so they could travel, through another, I guess, subspace dimension. I guess that's what, the Webway potentially is. So they could bypass the warp and bypass any kind of interaction with any creatures in the warp that could, harm them or potentially feed off them, etc. So, and I always had kind of an idea too of maybe, one or two, or, like Korn and Nurgle and Tzeentch, as far as I know, have been around for forever, and it was just Slaanesh that had been created from the issues going on with the Eldar. So I'd also kind of wondered, were any of those other Chaos Gods potentially a corrupted version of one of the Old Ones, that maybe they had gone into the warp, they got stuck there somehow and got corrupted by the warp, and they became one of the Chaos Gods, something like that. I don't know. Something that I always wondered. But yeah, one of the biggest questions I have in the 40K universe is, during this time period with the Old Ones, how much did they know about the chaos? How much did they interact with it, etc., etc.? So, anyway, we'll continue.
So to travel through it, though, at this time, it still required protected psychic pathways, and that's what they constructed. The Webway enabled the Old Ones to travel across unimaginable distances at incredible speed, essentially crossing space that would take millennia.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could try in the future to change some settings in the stream so we could have less delay in chat, but last time I tried it caused problems, so I don't know. But I feel like that's the result of people misunderstanding on time when the world works in 40K. The gods have both always existed and never existed, unless has always been there, but was also born. Right. When the Eldar fell.
Yeah, comparatively instantaneously, enabling them to reach the far corners of the universe. They believed that all life was useful, and they are known to have brought about the rise of numerous important species and formed thousands of worlds, which they also made their own.
Well, I mean, it's also, isn't it, they're basically kind of like aspects of nature. So like those aspects of nature were always there, and they just gain more power as more beings came into life through the universe, and then those emotions fed them, kind of a situation, you know? That's kind of how I like view and interpret them. They've always been there, but not necessarily in their current forms and with their current power.
They believed that all life was useful, and they are known to have brought about the rise of numerous important species and formed thousands of worlds, which they also made their own. As the Old Ones expanded, they encountered other advanced species, although none as far as themselves, once again remembering we are at this time millennia before the dawn of mankind. One such race the Old Ones happened across were known as the Necrons. The Necrons' planet of origin was barren. It was radiation blasted due to their violent nearby star, making their home incredibly hostile to life. Their bodies were riddled with radiation sickness, and they lived extremely short lives, constantly preparing for their inevitable deaths. Their cities were built in anticipation of their demise, little more than vast tomb complexes with a few temporary homes for the living.
That's got to be pretty depressing, to like essentially exist and have your existence and architecture based around your death. You would also, I mean, this is again just me, you know, but like, you would think that if they had evolved on this planet with the sun that harsh, they would evolve to be able to resist the type of radiation on there. But, you know, I didn't create this universe or the species, so who knows?
Now, they vainly tried to improve their mortality through scientific means, but after centuries they were consigned to the fact that their bodies could not be changed to survive on their home planet. Somehow though, despite this, they altered their plans to instead reach to the stars in a bid to escape their cursed cyclical fate of painful, unending death. And this is where they were to encounter the Old Ones. However, while the Old Ones were able to travel anywhere in space in mere steps and possessed near immortal length of life, the Necrons could not have been more opposite. They had to use slow-moving, non-warp ready ships equipped with stasis crypts that enabled the short-lived crew to survive out amongst the stars. They clad their ships in living metal, which was a metal literally that grows and lives like that of an organic material. And this was to allow it to withstand the rigours of spaceflight. Despite this though, colonization for the Necrons was a slow and painful process, as was everything in their history. But upon meeting the Old Ones and seeing their secrets of near immortality sparked a hope was raised within the Necrons. They finally saw a chance to be saved from their pain, a chance to live. And they petitioned the Old Ones for the secret of eternal life, but were refused this knowledge. In many ways, this refusal of knowledge doomed the universe to its fate of unending war and the events that were to follow.
Had the Old Ones actually helped them, you know, the Necrons never would have turned on them, seemingly. They could have potentially, you know, been like eventually, fuck that, we're greater than you, fuck you Old Ones, and then they just started a war with them anyway. But the whole reason they started the war with them to begin with is because they denied them any kind of ability to, you know, survive their short lives, you know, and deal with their situation with their radiation sickness, essentially. That led them to then ally with another, you know, great species, and et cetera, et cetera. The Great War, you know, came to be, that started everything, that gave chaos the power that, you know, it had, and it's all history.
Necrons burned with the resentment and hatred of the Old Ones and their unwillingness to save them from their pain and suffering. In addition to this, the Necrons Empire were battling brutal civil wars known as the Wars of Secession, which the various dynasties of Necrons were battling one another. The encounter with the Old Ones led the Triarch, the ruling council over all the Necrons, believed that an external foe would unify their species, and their bitterness to the Old Ones led to war, and it worked. The prospects of vast spoils and the secret to immortality brought the Necrons dynasties together to launch their campaign against the Old Ones. Their hopes, however, were typically short-lived, as the Necrons were unable to match or outmaneuver the Old Ones, whose...
It actually is kind of surprising when you think about it, that a species who is so short-lived, who doesn't have, you know, warp capable or faster than light travel, and would be far less technologically advanced as the old ones would even have a chance against them. But I guess it's also why they, you know, allied themselves with the Catan, who gave them, I guess, you know, better technologies to combat the old ones. So
use of the webway enabled them to always
yeah, that I always see that too. Whenever I think about the Necrons, you know, I always see the gold stuff as well.
Reinforce, preempt, and win battles against the Necron-Tyr. Eventually, conceding defeat, the Necron-Tyr were forced to retreat to their homeworlds, defeated, and importantly, more bitter and full of hatred for the Old Ones than ever before. At this time, the Old Ones forgot about the Necron-Tyr. They'd been vanquished. But the Necron-Tyr had no intention of dying out so silently. Instead, they redoubled their efforts to find new weapons to destroy the Old Ones and achieve what they sought so passionately, the secret to immortality. During their research for new weapons, they became aware of creatures living from the destructive solar radiation from their sun. These life forms were named the C'tan, star gods in the Necron-Tyr's language. Now, the C'tan at this early time were not particularly aware of anything beyond their need to absorb raw energy and power. Their godlike energy seemed nearly invincible to the Necron-Tyr, the perfect weapon to unleash against the Old Ones, but if only they could harness that power. And they did through their living metal. They constructed bodies, empty husks, shells for the C'tan to inhabit. And it's unknown how they contacted the C'tan initially, but through some means they encouraged the C'tan to take physical form using the living metal bodies that were constructed. Now, a C'tan known as the Deceiver spoke with Zarek, the Silent King, Lord of the Necron-Tyr Triarch, and told him how long ago the Old Ones and C'tan had also been at war, but the C'tan were defeated and scattered. This common foe brought the Necron-Tyr and C'tan to a close alliance, and the Necron-Tyr began to worship them as gods for their supreme power. But as the C'tan, once without conception of the world around them, became more manifest and intelligent, it was clear they were not the salvation that had been hoped for. The C'tan offered Zarek an offer for his race: immortality. But this was not to be the immortality of the Old Ones, but that of living metal shells that they had created.
Cost of their souls.
They proposed that a great period of biotransference would take place to give all Necron-Tyr that which they craved most: unending life. In his desperation for victory, glory, and immortality, the Necron-Tyr Zarek agreed to transfer all other Necron-Tyrs into living metal bodies, that their flesh would be destroyed, but their minds and essence would live forever. This, however, was the biggest tragedy ever to befall the Necron-Tyr. Their minds were dulled to that of soulless drones, and only a few leaders maintained some semblance of their former selves, including Zarek. And it was at this time that Zarek realized he had made a terrible, terrible mistake, and doomed his entire race. The C'tan turned the Necron-Tyr into slaves, ruling over them with extreme disregard and cruelty. The Necron-Tyr were extinguished from the universe forever, and the time of the Necrons had begun. But worse was still to come. We now return to the Old Ones, who during this time were largely unaware of the Necron-Tyr's demise, or the resurrection of their ancient enemy, the C'tan. This ignorance would prove catastrophic, as the Old Ones were left with no time to prepare an adequate defense against one of the most destructive wars in the history of the entire universe, known in the ancient history of the 41st millennium as the War in Heaven. So named, it was a war literally between gods and on a scale of unimaginable proportions, making the wars between races in the current time of Warhammer 40,000 seem like mere skirmishes by comparison.
Yeah, makes everything that's going on now seem like kids playing in a sandbox compared to what happened then. And so, I mean, you got to think too, like with all that emotion and death and destruction and turmoil going on, like how much that fed chaos and gave them power. You know what I mean?
This war against the Old Ones was very different to the first. The Necrons not only had more advanced weaponry, they now were protected in their immortal living metal form, and the Old Ones' mastery of the warp and webways was continually countered by the C'tan with their immense power over the material universe. In this time, the C'tan spread out like vicious predators, consuming entire worlds, feasting on the creations of the Old Ones, who now retreated to only their strongest bastions to plan a way out of complete annihilation. And all the while, entire worlds were razed, suns extinguished, and entire star systems devoured by the uncontainable C'tan. The Old Ones had now retreated to the webway, only venturing out when it was essential. But even these once impenetrable paths were not untainted by the fury of the Necron. Facing complete extinction, the Old Ones seeded new life they hoped would protect them. These new races would have powerful psychic abilities to defend against the C'tan. The early creations were the Eldar, the Knib and the Rashan, and whilst the Eldar would live through to the current time, almost nothing is known of the fate of the Knib or the Rashan, and it's entirely possible they were destroyed completely by the C'tan and Necrons, with only the Eldar surviving this early time. Among their other creations were also those which would become mankind, beasts that lived in their own ecosystem but had no specific role defined for them by the Old Ones and were left to their own natural evolution. During these ancient times, the Eldar learnt a great many secrets of the warp from the Old Ones, who regularly visited them, mentoring them on how to control their psychic powers and learn to use the warp. Eldar legends originating from this time state that they were raised by figures of shadow and light, referring to them as First Ones. It is said they were the first to have reached into the starry night and to be older than gods, yet mortal and subject to time. They are said to have left the Eldar and returned to the sky in order to allow their charges to develop over millennia. They would return later in strange, vast vessels, but that were worn and scarred. This was of course due to them being engaged in an unending war against the C'tan, with the Old Ones returning to inspect the Eldar and judge if they were fit for the war ahead. The Old Ones are known to have aided their younger race in focusing their psychic abilities to create warp-derived entities and use them as weapons against the vampiric gods of starlight, which of course is a reference to the C'tan. Now the Eldar legends continue stating that in the time of the First Ones, now dwindling in number to the point that they lost influence among the Eldar. And without their creator's sensibility and guidance, the Eldar's psychic creations born from the warp itself changed from sentient weapons into living gods of the Immaterium, who were the very first of their kind, and this change instigated not only the final catastrophe for the First Ones, but in time would come back to haunt the Eldar themselves with apocalyptic consequences. The war in heaven continued. By the time the Old Ones had prepared their forces, there were only 4 C'tan in existence. But swathes of other life forms in the galaxy the Old Ones had seeded were already extinguished.
That's a pretty interesting origin story that the Eldar actually created them, the Old Ones, and then forgot about them. Interesting.
The Old Ones finally unleashed the new races, sending the Necrons reeling as the power of the warp was an anathema to them, and they struggled to contain the advance of this new offensive. In response, the C'tan unified for the first time in millions of years. However, now a new and devastating unforeseen side effect of the Old One's creations began to manifest in this period as the young race's psychic development disturbed the energies of the warp itself. And from this pure energy came mass and form, and older warp entities became predatory as the warp began to become a more hostile environment.
Turbulent.
Cracks in reality would appear, and the entities of the warp saw entry into the material universe, forcing the Old Ones again to bring about the emergence of new species to defend their final strongholds.
Yeah, I forget what they're called, but there's some kind of creatures or whatever that they're like psychic vampires or whatever that the Old Ones were extremely susceptible to, that were hunting them down. I forget what they were called, but yeah, there's some kind of weird creature. But it's very interesting. I didn't know that there were also other races that the Old Ones had created that potentially were wiped out by the C'tan or C'tan, however it's pronounced, and the Necrons, and they, I guess, seemingly didn't really have a lasting effect on anything that happened. And so it was the Eldar with their psychic war capabilities that was the only thing that was really holding them back. So warp native Xenos, yeah. Enslavers, yeah, that's what they were called. So interesting, Very interesting.
They were now under assault from so many different directions, they barely had anywhere left to turn. Among their creations included the green-skinned, ultra-violent Croc, later known as Orcs.
Yeah,
and they're technologically...
Orcs are the devolved versions of them. The Quarks were, you know, much more massive, stronger, and intelligent than what they are now, and I guess the situation was that once the old ones were destroyed and the war kind of ended, the Eldar retreated into the webway for the most part, and the Orcs didn't really have anyone to fight. So they kind of just fought amongst themselves and devolved into what they are.
Adept Jakiro, later known as Orcs, and they're technologically adept Jakiro. Now though, the old ones, even with their vast knowledge of creation and their near immortal lifespan, had run out of time. With their interstellar network being breached, their greatest work and places of power being overrun by the horrific beings of the warp, tragically it manifested by the very creations that they had formed to save them.
Right.
Among the most insidious of these entities.
Yeah, exactly. And potentially, if they come across a species, you know, like the Tyranids, for example, I could easily see it happening where the Tyranids keep assaulting the Orcs to the point where they have to re-evolve back to where they were, or to something even greater, and then the Orcs should become an even crazier threat. You know what I mean?
Were the enslavers, who penetrated and dominated the minds of the younger races in order to open portals for themselves to the material universe. The plague of enslavers was the final blow for the old ones, who were scattered forever, their power and knowledge destroyed.
Now, I think, well, you know, one of the origin theories of the Emperor is that he is potentially an old one or a fragment of an old one that either infused himself in a human or, you know, was been reborn in human form to, you know, go out there and I guess, you know, potentially retake the stars, because that's what their original, you know, birthright was, is the old ones. They were out there to, like you said, gain knowledge and seed the universe and shape things in their image. So that's one of the origin theories from what I know of the Emperor, that he's, you know, this star child and potentially either a full old one in, you know, human form, or at least a fragment of one in human form, which is why he's so powerful compared to other beings that are older.
The combination of an unending onslaught from the C'tan combined with the mistakenly unleashed warp horrors led to the old one's complete destruction. The surviving C'tan and Necrons had the final pleasure of seeing the demise of their most bitter enemy. Now, after the destruction of the old ones, Zarek, lord of the former Necron tier Triarch, as you all remember, was left biding his time, waiting until the time was right to strike and lead a Necron revolt against the C'tan.
Right.
The Necrons focused the unimaginable energies of the living universe into cataclysmic weapons created from all their amassed knowledge that were too devastating for even the C'tan, the godlike C'tan, to endure. And these C'tan, near gods, almost impossible to destroy entirely due to their very nature, were instead shattered across the universe into energy shards. Zarek now saw that having destroyed the C'tan, the remaining new races created by the old ones...
And I think the Necrons, what they did after, like, shattering them, didn't they, like, take the fragments of them and use them as, like, energy sources, essentially, to power a lot of their stuff? And essentially enslave them now? You know, having a big role reversal? I believe that's what happened.
Zarek now saw that having destroyed the C'tan, the remaining new races created by the old ones, such as the Eldar, were becoming more powerful, knowledgeable and dominant. The Necrons, exhausted by eons of war, could not stand against them. So rather than risk certain annihilation, he ordered that the Necrons withdraw into their tomb worlds and slumber in the Great Sleep, to reawaken 60 million years in the future and assert their dominance over the galaxy once more. The Silent King, however, did not join his people in slumber. He destroyed a protocol that allowed him to control over the Necron race and journeyed out into the void of intergalactic space, where he may not...
Where he met the Tyranids and was like, God damn, this is an even bigger problem. I gotta come back and we gotta prepare for these motherfuckers.
find solace but instead penance for dooming the Necrontyr race in his deal with the now vanquished Satan. It was rumoured that the final Old One survived destruction from the Satan and Necrons. This survivor hid away where he continued his old ways of tweaking, dabbling and prodding around. Now we'll discuss about what he may have been doing in future content. When he was done with his work, he departed into the warp in order to hide and watch as the Old Ones knew the warp intimately. As the Necrons now retreated into stasis until this time of cataclysm had ended, the lesser creations of the Old Ones, such as mankind, continued their own paths of development, to eventually rise as powerful forces in their own right. The mantle of galactic dominion would now pass to the Eldar, but the Eldar would survive where the Old Ones did not, and would see the last Necrons depart into their great sleep after they had turned on the Satan. Now that concludes our history of the Old Ones in Warhammer 40,000. This really is the foundation for all events that would follow and sets a lot of facts and implications into future events. So join me next time as we discover what the Eldar do with 60 million years of time on their hands.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching today, guys. As always, I need your support. Please get involved in the comments. Tell me what you thought about this video. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you then.
All right. There we go. There we go. Another great video by Luton. As always, links will be down below in the description to his original video and to his channel. As he requested, please go over there and give this video of his a like. Give his channel a look-see. If you see any content there that you like, give him a sub. Man does a lot of great 40K content, and he definitely deserves some love. So please go over there and do that. Would greatly appreciate it. So, I mean, yeah, great video kind of going in, you know, I guess the origins of the 40K universe. I would like to know, I mean, I guess a lot of it is still speculative, not really known, hasn't really been developed, and who knows if they really ever will. But I would really like to learn more about the Old Ones, you know, and exactly what they were trying to accomplish. I guess, like he said, they were just essentially trying to gain as much knowledge as possible, but it's like they were the first sentient beings in the universe. Why were they really just so interested in our galaxy? You know, because there's trillions of galaxies out there. You know, what is it about our galaxy and seeding life in our galaxy that, you know, interested them so much? You know, why not? Why do it just here? Why do it elsewhere? Does it also potentially mean that there could be Old Ones in other galaxies out there, and that these are just these Old Ones here, you know, etc., etc. So, and I would like to hear, you know, his video going in about what happened with the Old One, because like I said, I think it's alluding to him potentially either creating or becoming the Emperor, maybe putting a fragment of himself in the Emperor, and that's why the Emperor is as powerful as he is, you know, etc., because he is a fragment or, you know, part of an Old One, if not an Old One. So, but yeah, great video talking about the Old Ones, the War in Heaven, the origins of the Necrons and the Battle of Catan and the Eldar, and how they started. So, yeah, like I said, go check out Luton, check out his stuff. If you enjoyed this video, you know, consider leaving a like and a sub on my channel if you enjoyed this video as well. Really appreciate it. We're doing this live, so if you want to come and join in the discussions that we have, feel free to click the join button below and see if any of my YouTube membership benefits have any kind of interest to you. And I appreciate you guys coming in and hanging out and enjoying the video, man. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to do so. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Have a wonderful day. Take it easy.